Good morning, Airborne Church. How are you? Good. Oh, welcome everyone. Welcome everyone online. And I'm just going to go ahead and say it. I have a fourth kid, and it is incredible. And it's wonderful. I want to show you a picture. Can we show them a picture of my... Wow. Yep. So, hey, guys, have a good day. And we'll see you guys next week, okay? That's Leo. He's amazing. He's wonderful. Being a dad of 4 kids, I never would have thought, honestly, never would have planned it. And that's the goodness and craziness of our God, you know, and I'm so thankful for it. And before I go any further, I want to be able to share something about my pastors. In like Old Testament times and throughout the Bible, you'll sometimes hear references of vineyards and vines, and you'll hear a word called grafting, where in these times they would take vines and they would graft them and they would merge them in with other vines, and in turn it would have strength, in turn it would come together as one. And it's an analogy in the Bible of Jesus and his message of hope and how it's for everyone, not just for one group, but it's for everyone. But what I want to say about that in regards to my pastors, Kevin and Beth, is what grafting means to me is what originally wasn't a part of something now is. And I want to say to Pastors Kevin and Beth, thank you for allowing my family to be grafted in, not just to Airborne Church family, but to the Green family. I thank you for how you've allowed us to come in, and I love you guys. And so, church, can we bring honor to those 2 pastors who set the way for us all? Whew. Legends. What a word. What a series that we're in. Legends. Who's been enjoying this series of legends? The cool thing about this message and the cool thing about this series and the heart behind it is that we all start on the same playing field here with legends. What I mean by that is the heart behind this isn't just for people who know the Bible to learn more about the Bible. We know that people come from different upbringings, different ways. Some people, you hear about these characters, and maybe it's the first time you've heard about one of these Bible characters. Or for others of you, you know all about these characters because you're the Bible scholar. But the cool thing about it is we can come together in this room, we can come together in this place, and we're all going to be in the same level playing field because God will speak to us all, regardless of where you're at or what you know or what you think you don't know. That's what I love about this whole series of legends. That's what I love about the heart behind it. And man, have we heard of some incredible stories of legends. Just to give you a recap, we've covered Noah, we've covered Moses, we've covered Paul. The last 2 weeks, Pastor Beth has knocked it out of the park with John the Baptist, hasn't she? She has just brought it. And there are so many men and women in the Bible that we could do a legend message on. And I just want to say, just in case you forgot or maybe you don't know, that people who we're talking about, they're not fictional characters. They're not people that you think, they're not like just someone from like a book like Harry Potter or like a 6-part Twilight series, okay? These are real life people from the Bible who did these real life things. They happened. It's actually in a Bible. They're not just made up characters in a book. They're real life people. This is real stuff. And as you think of that and as you prepare for that, I'm going to go ahead and pray as we go forward. Is that good? God, I thank you for this wonderful day. I thank you, Jesus, for what you have for us to hear about the legend today. God, I believe that you are going to open our eyes, open our ears, to be able to hear and to see and to know what you have for us today. In Jesus' name, amen. So, I remember when Morgan and I were just these 2 bright-eyed college students in Australia, and we were like, God, you send us wherever. We were ready for God to send us wherever, and so we were so excited for where he was going to lead us, and all of a sudden we find out that we're going to get sent to West Virginia. And just to give you some context before you try to find me in the parking lot, we're from Ohio, okay? So we're Ohioans, all right? And so we Ohioans have some different feelings about the states that border them. And so just to give you context, the state that Ohioans just dislike the most all the way down here in our eyes is Michigan. And Michigan is like trash to Ohioans, okay? Michigan is like, it's where the bottom feeders live. Michigan is, close to hell. So that's how Ohioans feel. He just said hell in church. Yes, I did. And then right above Michigan is Kentucky, because, Kentucky, all right? So Kentucky's right there. And then for Ohioans, right above Kentucky is West Virginia. So I have to often make the joke that it took God to move Morgan and I all the way across the world to prepare us to move to West Virginia. So we are, we're honored. But God had a plan for our family. He certainly did. And essentially, God was calling us to a new land. And that's where we pick it up with the legend we're going to hear about today, because we're going to be hearing about a man who was called to a new land, to leave his country, to leave his hometown, to go to somewhere he'd never been before. What I love about the legend we're going to hear about today is that we're focusing on the origin story of this legend. We're going to hear about the true life story of someone who had incredible faith, who risked it all to follow God, who went through adventure. We'll hear of love, we'll hear of terrible mistakes, we'll hear of incredible miracles. Today we're going to be following and learning about the legend of Abraham. But before Abraham was even known as Abraham, before he became one of God's most notable Bible characters in the history of our Christian faith, before he was written down in the pages of our Bible from Genesis all the way into the New Testament, before he was even known as Abraham, there was a man named Abram. And there was a journey that God wanted to call him on. And that is the story we'll be hearing about today. It all starts in Genesis 12 in our Bibles, and we'll be going from Genesis 12 to 21 and following this origin story of Abram. So you guys ready to meet him? Yeah. All right, let's look at that. Genesis 12, verse 1, you'll see it on the screens. The Lord had said to Abram, go from your country, your people and your father's household to the land I will show you. I will make you into a great nation, and I will bless you, and I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing. And I will bless those who bless you, and I will curse those who curse you, and all the peoples on earth will be blessed through you. So Abram went as the Lord had told him, and Lot went with him. Abram was 75 years old. Everyone remember that? Say it with me, 75 years old. He was 75 years old when he set out from Haran. He took his wife Sarai, his nephew Lot, all the possessions they had accumulated and the people they had acquired in Haran, and they set out for the land of Canaan, and they arrived there. And in that first bit, we get to know who Abram is. We got some needed details to kind of figure out who Abram is. We find out first and foremost, his name's Abram. That's good to know. We know who he is now. He has a wife named Sarai. They have no kids. They're both up in their age. They live in a country known as Haran, which is present-day Turkey. And then God calls Abram to move from all of that to a new place called Canaan, which is present-day Israel and Palestine. And on top of that, even in their old age, God promises them to make them into a great nation, which foreshadowing means some kids must be on the way. And it's by no mistake, what I love about this is by no mistake that the Bible starts off hearing about Abram by classifying it in the Bible. When you open your Bible, you'll see the title above the text that says, The Call of Abram. The call of Abram. And that's my first point. We are all called. We are all called. And there's one true, original, holy calling that God's called us all to, and that is to be in relationship with him. It all starts right there. That's the original calling. There's no other calling that can give you purpose, that can give you meaning, that can bring you life without first knowing that first original true calling, which is just being in relationship with him, which is just knowing who our God is. And then once you understand that original holy calling, then God does what he did for Abraham. He's calling Abraham into a new land. And that's what God does with us. He calls us into newness. He calls us into new land. Do you want to know why? Because it stretches us, doesn't it? It gets us out of our comfort zone, doesn't it? When God calls us into something new, it's not natural. There's a little bit of natural tension, a little bit of natural confrontation, but it builds us, doesn't it? And it grows us, because that's what it's about. What I love about God is that God wants to take us on a journey to our calling. It took Abram and Sarai months to travel, by the way. In the Bible, it doesn't necessarily say how long. It doesn't say, for 45 days they walked. But what we can gather is that when they were walking from present-day Turkey to Israel, it took them roughly 8 to 12 months to walk in the wilderness, to walk in the wild, to walk in the deserts and through the mountains with all their possessions, all their people, all their livestock, and get to where God had called them. For months, they trusted God to the calling of a new land. For months, they didn't arrive yet in the new land, but they made progress each day. For months, they're in what I like to call the in-between place. Where, God, I know you've called me to this place. And so you start moving, then you start moving in the in-between place. But what we don't realize sometimes is that when we're in this in-between place, it can get kind of hard. It can get kind of vulnerable. Some of us, we don't like it when we feel like God's called us to something, but we get frustrated when it becomes hard all of a sudden. Or you get upset when you find out that it actually takes hard work doing this thing that God has called us to do. What I love about Abram and Sarah is that they traveled for months. And yet we sometimes get upset when we have to wait 5 hours, let alone 5 days. And goodness, God would never call me to anything if it took more than 5 months to wait for, right? Some of us get to that in-between place and we stop and we set up camp. We don't move from it. We say, God, I feel like you called me, but now I don't know. And it's getting harder and harder. So I'm just going to plant my stakes in the ground. And they get stuck in the in-between. And I believe today people will be revived from that place. For months, Abram and Sarai traveled. What does that show us? What that shows me is this, that the journey to our calling from God is just as important as the calling itself. The journey to our calling from God is just as important as the calling itself, because it's the journey that builds our faith. It's the journey that gives us wisdom. It's the journey that makes us rely on God in a whole new way. We are all called, and we are all called to new lands. So we fast forward a few chapters in Genesis, and we pick up again in Genesis 15. And at this point in the story of Abraham, we find out that Abraham's upset. Abraham is kind of mad because the one thing that he wants, the one thing that he and Sarai want, they don't have it yet. And though they've been promised a great nation, they're still thinking, God, where is just that one that we're believing for? And so we pick it up in Genesis 15, verse 1, and it says this: sometime later, the Lord spoke to Abram in a vision and said to him, do not be afraid, Abram, for I will protect you, and your reward will be great. But Abram replied, O sovereign Lord, what good are all your blessings when I don't even have a son? Since you've given me no children, Eliezer of Damascus, a servant in my household, will inherit all my wealth. You've given me no descendants of my own, so one of my servants will be my heir. And Abram's just saying to God, you're telling me you're going to bless me, you're telling me you're going to reward me, you're telling me not to be afraid, but all the while, what's that worth to me when I don't even have someone to give it to? I don't even have a kid to pass that down to. And Abram's just being honest with God about the part that's missing in his life that he wants the most. And God hears him. In the very next verse, God says this: then the Lord said to him, no, Your servant will not be your heir, for you will have a son of your own who will be your heir. Then the Lord took Abram outside and said to him, look up into the sky and count the stars if you can. That's how many descendants you will have. And Abram believed the Lord, and the Lord counted it to him as righteousness because of his faith. You want to know what I love about looking at stars? Is that how many of you know that the more, like you start looking at the stars and before you know it, like the longer you look, the more stars you see. You know what I mean? You start looking and you go like, what? Like, look at that. You can't even count it. And so can you imagine Abraham going into a place where there's no city lights, there's no big towns, there's no light pollution. He looks up to the sky and he sees every star in the galaxy. And he believes that he will have descendants. He believes he will have an heir. And because of that, God said, I credit that as righteousness. What that means is he believed that he had something before he ever even had it. But right about this time in the story of Abram, things get a little juicy. Things get a little weird. Things get a little like, all of a sudden I feel like we're reading like a tabloid magazine and you're like, wait, where did that come from? What happened? She said, did what? It's weird because in the Bible, we don't necessarily know the time frame of like what we just heard and saw happen into what I'm about to read to you. But in the Bible, when you're reading the story, it's just one page over. It's like you read the stars, look at the sky, that's amazing. The next page over, you're like, whoa, what is this I'm reading? And let me tell you what happens here. Just buckle up, okay? Buckle up. If there's kids in here, cover their ears, okay? Genesis 16 rolls around. Verse 1, we get right into it. Verse 1. Now Sarai, Abram's wife, had not been able to bear children for him, but she had an Egyptian servant named Hagar. Everyone go, uh-oh. Here comes trouble. So Sarai said to Abram, the Lord has prevented me from having children. Go and sleep with my servant. Everyone look to the person to your right and go, what'd he say? Go and sleep with my servant, she said. Perhaps I can have children through her. And Abram agreed. Look to the person to your left and go, no, he didn't. He did. Abram agreed with Sarah's proposal. So Sarai, Abram's wife, took Hagar, the Egyptian servant, and gave her to Abram as a wife. This happened 10 years after Abram had settled in the land of Canaan. So Abram had sexual relations with Hagar, and she became pregnant. Everyone say gross. And that's what happened. You don't know it when you read it. It sounds so casual, but what this is one of the greatest mistakes in the history of Bible. Because Sarai was desperate. Sarai wanted something so bad. Abram wanted something so bad. They were tired of hearing about a promise. They wanted to take some matters into their own hands, and in doing so, it cost them almost everything. Abram and Sarai compromised their God-given promise for an immediate answer, and that's my next point. Don't compromise your God-given promises for an immediate answer. Don't compromise your God-given promises from heaven for what you think is an immediate solution. Don't compromise it. But surely no one in here has ever done anything like that, right? Surely no one in here has ever made a compromise out of making things worse in the end. I'm like an auctioneer. Right here. I surprised myself how fast I talk for a minute. Is this a new calling? No, it's not. Surely no one here has ever thought that they wanted to take matters into their own hands, and so they did something that maybe they shouldn't have done and it made things worse in the end for them. Surely no one here has ever made a compromise like that. And before we judge too harshly Abram and Sarai, did you catch the context of how long they'd been in Canaan? Verse 3, it says, this happened 10 years after Abram had settled in Canaan. You want to know what that tells me? God called them to a place where there was promises, and then they got to that place where the promises were supposed to be, and then they waited 10 years without it. 10 years they were living in the in-between. 10 years they were going, God, where's this promise? 10 years they were going, God, I want this promise. 10 years, and then slowly but surely a compromise started to come up. A situation came up which presented itself, and they thought maybe we can just make it happen on our own instead of waiting for God. 10 years, and you're in here or you're online, and you're in the situation where there's a compromise potentially affecting your future. You've been waiting to find a spouse, but you grow tired of waiting, so you compromise your morals just to be with someone instead of waiting for God's perfect mate. You compromise your purity just for immediate satisfaction. You're starting a business, or you start a business and it hits hard times. You compromise your integrity as a business owner. You cut corners on how you take care of your employees instead of doing all you can to uphold principles of a Christian businessman or businesswoman. Your marriage is in a rut. You compromise your God-ordained holy vows of matrimony by beginning to talk to someone outside of your marriage. I know there's those in here who are in pain because you've been waiting for that promise, doing everything right, counting on God and trusting in God. You're praying, you're going to church, you're asking God for the promise. You're in that in-between place, but then the praying begins to fade. The bitterness begins to rise. Your heart begins to grow cold, and you're angry at God now, and you find yourself and you're at church, but you're just going through the motions. It's not real to you, and you think, I'm not waiting any longer, and a compromise presents itself, and can I just stop you for a moment? Those of you who are about to compromise your God-given promise. And can I implore you with everything to stay the course? Because your story isn't over, and your promises are on their way. And the beauty and mercy of our God is that even if we compromised it, God has a way of redeeming. God has a way of still making something that looks broken beautiful. And we see it in Abram and Sarai in Genesis 17. Again, just the next page over. We see God do something that redefined them. He changed their names. He looked at Abram and said, Abram, you will now be known as Abraham, which means father to many. He said, Sarai, she will now be known as Sarah, which he described as being a mother to the nations. And what's interesting about it is he changes their names before they even have a kid, just to remind them that his promise is on its way. God has a way of redeeming things. I remember growing up, I can't remember when this lie sunk in. I can't remember when I first started believing it, but I had this lie that I'd be a bad father to a son. For some reason, I always looked at it as naturally to be a dad to a daughter. That became natural to me. And my first kid was Madeline, my daughter. It was so natural to me. But then when we found out we were pregnant again, we were having a boy. I remember Morgan found me one night as she was pregnant, and I was just crying. And I looked at her and I said, am I going to be a good father to a son? Am I going to be a good dad to him? And then we had Zeke, my firstborn son, and it just changed my life. And then we got pregnant again with a boy, and we named him Lincoln, and it changed my life again. And then we got pregnant again with another boy. We named him Leo, and it changed our life. Then we got pregnant again. Oh, wait, no, we didn't. We didn't get pregnant again. And I got it. After that third boy, God was showing me something. He was redeeming something inside my heart. And just like he had to rename Abraham and Sarah into a new identity, God did that in me with my 3 boys. I have so many sons. I find it comical now. I can laugh at it and go, God, I know what you're doing. I see it now. I see what you're doing with giving me these boys. I see it, and that's how I know. And that's why our last point is this: God always has the last laugh. God has the last laugh. Is anyone in here like me? You just love laughter? Like, gets you in trouble sometimes? Yeah, that's me. I'm the guy that laughs at all the inappropriate things that I shouldn't laugh at, okay? It's a problem, okay? So if someone's in front of me and they trip and fall, I'm gonna laugh, okay? I'm just gonna laugh. There, I said it. If I'm talking to you and we're maybe even in a semi-serious conversation, I might just start laughing out loud in your face. Don't take it personally. I have a problem, okay? I have a problem. All right, who knows that when your kids do something that you know they shouldn't do, but if they catch you laughing, it's like game over. Like they think it's okay. Well, the other day, Lincoln wanted to look like Black Panther. And so he got undressed, as you do when you want to look like Black Panther, and he took a marker and he colored his whole body. And he made the armor and he was really proud of himself. And I was like, that's hilarious. And I laughed and I enjoyed it. And Morgan's like, no, it's not funny. It was hilarious. But the worst one, don't judge me on this one. Some of you are going to judge. Don't judge, though. The worst one, I will laugh because I get nervous. Sometimes if I'm sitting in the pews at a funeral service, I said it. I laugh sometimes because I get nervous. First service, 16 people walked out and they said, I'm never coming back. And you know how, speaking of laughter, how you're not supposed to laugh at someone, but with someone? Unless you're a Redskins fan, then everyone's laughing at you because they're just really struggling to get it together. They need to find God. They're looking for God. They're not laughing. They're weeping. But to be nice, right? You laugh with someone, not at them, right? Just to bring it back into the Bible, because I promise I'm going to bring it back. Abraham and Sarah, their names are changed now. After their names are changed, they still had moments of disbelief to the point to where they laughed at God. Not with them, at him. And we see it in two different chapters. And first in Genesis 17, we see it with Abraham. And it says this, but he laughed at himself in disbelief. How could I become a father at age 100? He thought, and how can Sarah have a baby when she's 90 years old? And then again in Genesis 18, Sarah overheard Abraham talking to God. And this time God said that in 1 year, Sarah will have a baby. And Sarah overheard this. And so it says in Genesis 18 that she laughed silently to herself and said, how could a worn out woman like me enjoy such pleasure, especially when my master, my husband, is also so old? And I get it. How many times have you heard someone say something that they're believing for and it sounds funny? It sounds comical. But sometimes what I've learned is it just takes some laugh out loud faith to believe for things. It takes some good old fashioned crazy faith to believe for something. I remember when we were believing for this building and Pastor Kevin went to 13 banks to get a loan for this building. 13. Think about it. First bank says no, I'm gonna keep believing. Second bank says no, I'm gonna keep believing. Third bank says no, I'm gonna keep believing. Fourth bank says no, I'm gonna keep believing. Fifth bank says no, I'm gonna keep believing. Sixth bank says no, I'm gonna keep believing. Seventh bank says no, I'm gonna keep believing, because there was a crazy, audacious faith. So eighth bank, they said no, he keeps believing. Ninth bank, they said no, he keeps believing. 10th bank says no, he still keeps believing. The 11th bank says no, he keeps believing. The 12th bank says no. And I bet it was right around this time, Pastor Kevin's like, I don't even care how many banks I go to. We're gonna build this church, because he saw it and he saw the seats filled. And so on that 13th bank, on that laugh out loud faith, we got the loan. We built the building. That's the type of laugh out loud, audacious, crazy faith. Laugh out loud faith. And I believe what Pastor Steve Kelly said over you, Pastor Kevin, is so true, that with half the work will be double the blessing. And I see it too. I see it. I see it. And what's cool is we all see it too. And so when our crazy faith starts to join up together and we start to see that we're not just going to be a light for the city, why not a light for the nation? Why not a light for people to look at and go, I saw what they did in Martinsburg, West Virginia. I saw it, and it's a light that broadcasts across the world. That's what I see. That's the crazy faith that I see. And that's the crazy faith that sometimes just requires us to say, you know what, doctor? I don't believe what you just said. It's the type of crazy faith that says, you know what? You say I might not be able to have a baby. I'm believing I will have a baby. The type of crazy faith that says the enemy will not destroy my marriage. The type of crazy faith that says, you know what? I'm going to get back up even if the mountains are in my way. I know that God will move those mountains. It's the type of crazy faith that sometimes makes people laugh at you. But you believe it. Abraham and Sarah get to the point in their story where it's now 25 years later, 25 years of waiting for that promise. 25 years before it actually came, 25 years. God said, you will have a son, and they waited 25 years in the in-between. And we read some of the greatest verses in the Bible right here in Genesis 21, where it says this: the Lord kept his word and did for Sarah exactly what he had promised. She became pregnant and she gave birth to a son for Abraham in his old age. This happened at just the time God had said it would. It goes on to say, and Sarah declared, God has brought me laughter, and all who hear this will laugh with me, not at me. Who would have said, Abraham, that Sarah would nurse a baby? Yet I have given Abraham a son in his old age. Church, I've come to declare something, that those who feel that they are in the in-between, those who feel that their promises have been stolen or broken, I've come to declare that God is a keeper of his word, and he will come to do what he promised to do at exactly the right time. And when he does it, he will restore your laughter. He will restore your joy. He will restore your hope. He will restore your marriage. He will restore your health, because he's coming to do what he said he's going to do.